You're listening to It's Getting Better, a podcast about mental health, hope, and overcoming challenges. While this podcast is not intended to replace medical advice or professional help, we hope that the stories and experiences shared by young people can help you on your journey of getting better. I'm your host, Kate, and today I'm so excited to be joined by my cousin, Rachel, and she is the greatest. I'm so excited to have her here. So I'll let her give you an introduction and tell you a little bit about why she's on the podcast today.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm 16. I'm a junior in high school, and I've dealt with a lot of OCD, ADHD, and depression, so I'll be talking a bit about that.
Let's just jump right into it, and will you tell us a little bit about those terms, OCD and ADHD, and what they mean and sort of what they look and feel like to you?
Yeah, so I'll start with ADD or ADHD. ADD was the old term they used to use, but then the doctors changed it. So it stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder, but some people only have the hyperactive part, some people only have the attention deficit part. I personally only have the attention deficit part, but it's a complete term. Some people have only parts of it. And basically what it means is it's very hard for me to focus. My mind switches things very often. For example, I'll be in class and listening to the teacher and something will distract me, not like a bird out the window, like they always say, oh, is that a bird? But it'll be just some like random thought about a movie I watched last night. And I'll be completely listening to that. And I'll be like, oh, wait, somebody was talking to me. And that happens a lot when I'm listening to, podcasts or audiobooks. I'll just realize I've been thinking about something completely different and I haven't even been heard what's been said at all for like the last 5 minutes. It switches things very fast. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. And so what that basically means is, there are several different types, but the basic premise is you get these things called intrusive thoughts. And everybody gets intrusive thoughts. Like, have you ever been walking past a bank and be like, oh, I could rob that bank? But OCD people get them a lot more often and they ruminate about them. So a lot of people think of OCD as like, oh, I need to keep this clean or something. But it's very different. Some people have it where it's about germs and they can't stop thinking if they'll like wash their hands and then they'll be like, oh, wait, did I wash my hands? Did I wash my hands? Did I have germs? Or am I going to get sick? And you just ruminate about that one thing for so long. I personally have a lot of scrupulosity and puro, which is called. Basically, that means I've got a lot of religious OCD. So what I'm mainly concerned is not like getting sick, but like, am I going to get to heaven? Does God love me? Or it'll be like, am I a morally good person? And so a lot of my intrusive thoughts have been about that. And I'll have like a very bad thought about like something I could do to someone. You'd be like, no, I would never do that. I would never do that. And I'd sit there and ruminate and change the scenario in my mind. Be like, no, this is what I would do if this happened. And just, it's not like, but the thing is then I couldn't think those thoughts, which just come into your head. Everybody's got them, right? Without doing a compulsion and thinking about it and doing something to protect it. And I guess I should go into what compulsions are. I guess going back to the person who wants to be very clean, for them, a compulsion might be washing their hands often. It's just anything to make that anxiety that comes from the intrusive thought go away.
That was a great explanation, and I feel like I understand both of those terms a lot better, so thank you. I'm curious, you talk about OCD as being these intrusive thoughts, and then ADHD as sort of getting distracted by thoughts. So I imagine that they must be sort of connected in some way. Has that been the case for you, and what is that like?
Yes, they're very connected. I've had doctors, in fact, be like, well, are we sure you have both of them? Because they're often mistaken for one another. Actually, how I found out I have OCD is through, I discovered I had ADD in like 7th grade. And so they gave me this medication that would help my mind focus and stay on one thing for longer. Unfortunately, a side effect of some ADHD medication is that it can very much increase OCD thoughts. And looking back, I can realize how, like, at different times in my life, I've had these intrusive thoughts and compulsions. But then it got very worse when I started to take these ADD meds because I would be able to only then focus on what my intrusive thoughts were and not focus in school. So yes, my schoolwork still suffered. So often now what happens is my ADD will switch me from whatever I'm supposed to be listening to or supposed to be paying attention to into something else, which will delve into an intrusive thought, which then includes a compulsion to try and stop it.
That sounds really difficult, and trying to medicate with both of those things happening sounds really hard. I'm curious about the timeline for you, and you said that you started ADD meds or ADHD meds years ago. So what has sort of like the progression and starting to figure that out and having these experiences been like for you, and how maybe in the past has it affected your life, and how is it still a part of your life now?
Well, that's quite a few questions. I'll try and go through them if I remember them. For ADD, it's started just obviously in elementary school. You know, no kid likes to do homework. But for me, when my parents would finally make me sit down and do it, I would sit there and I would just completely think about something else, and it would take me hours and hours. And not because I couldn't do it, but just because my mind would get stuck on so many different things. Yeah, so the timeline, I started taking ADD meds, and that was right about when I mean, I didn't know it then, but looking back, I realized that's when my intrusive thoughts got very badly. And it started not even with morally bad thoughts, but just something random. It sounds very stupid when I say it, but I used to like almost pretend or imagine there were these invisible strings on people. And I would have to like get them off by creating force fields around the people. And it sounds so stupid now that I'm thinking about it. And even back then, I thought it was so stupid. But it was I knew that they weren't there. I could like look at the person. I didn't have anything where reality was changed for me. I could clearly see, but for some reason it would just bug me that my mind would imagine these strings on them. So I'd create a force field, and that would sometimes often distract me from my schoolwork. I would have to be creating these imaginary force fields in my mind around the person beside me. And actually back then my mom was like, "Hey, we're going to the doctor. Do you want to tell her about that?" And I was like, "No, that's so stupid. That's so dumb." Like, so that's kind of where it started. And from there, it just kind of delves into different compulsions. OCD often focuses on whatever's like most important to you in your life. So then I would get often a lot of thoughts about mean things about other person and be like, "Oh, she's ugly. Like her hair looks bad." And be like, no, that's not, no, I shouldn't think that. Like she's like a beautiful child of God. I would just say that. I would like repeat that over and over in my mind, kind of like a mantra. But then I would have to keep saying it whenever I would think about thoughts. And it was very difficult because I would always be there trapped in my mind and just going through the hallway. I couldn't. There's no escape from it, right? You're in class, you're watching a movie, no matter what you're doing, there's no escape from things inside your mind, which I think makes mental health so hard.
So then at what point did you get on medication and start treating this OCD that you found out you had?
So I've had a few family members that have had OCD, not quite as severe as I've had it. But we started to kind of recognize the symptoms, and I ended up doing some research and found that ADD meds can cause OCD. So then we did go back to the doctor, and so we started switching to different medication, and she put me on some pills that were for OCD, but also like had a side effect of helping with depression. But honestly, it did not help. I still was distracted in school, and my OCD was still getting bad. And honestly, medication has been a huge struggle for me. It's been such a long time to try and find out. It's not like when you've got an infection and they're like, "Here are the antibiotics to try and like fight this virus inside of you." It's very much like a personal thing for what works for you, and what works for someone beside you might not work for you, or what's worked for you in the past might still not work if you need to up your dosage or something. So I've definitely been communicating with my doctor a lot. So we finally realized I had OCD. And so I went to my doctor, and she recommended, this is once I got very bad. And I couldn't like function. I say I couldn't function as in I couldn't function in my mind. But of course I outwardly did all the things. That's one of the things I've done a lot, is very much try to hide it. Even to like my mom, like, I said lots of my family members have OCD. She's not one of them. So she doesn't really get it. And she's one of the most loving people I know, but she just did not get it. And she would always tell me, "Oh, it makes me so sad when I hear you're sad." So I would stop telling her I'm sad. And she would sometimes say like at night, like, "Oh, Rachel, I'm so glad you had such a great day today. You seem like your OCD wasn't bad today." And I would think in my mind, "Oh, this was one of the worst days of my life. Like I can't stop thinking about these things, and I can't stop like fixing these thoughts in my mind, or picturing these awful, horrid scenarios of myself and being like, what? That's horrible, shocking." So yeah, so we ended up going to this place. It was for OCD intensive care. And this was right when all the 2020 crazy started. So everything was in quarantine. So actually the therapy that I would have had to go to was online. But it was like 3 hours long. I would go every day for 3 hours. And this was still when I was doing online school. And honestly, that was one of the worst moments of my life. I would go for 3 hours and just suffer and sit there. And they did this thing called exposure therapy, where they have you like confront your compulsions. So they would have me watch dumb things like The Bachelorette or something, where like, I don't know, a lot of people were dressed immodestly because that was one of my things at the time. And people would be swearing and talking about like, sexual things. And just they're like, you are not allowed to do a compulsion. Just like, don't do it. But it would be so hard. It was hurting my mind so badly. So I'd do that for 3 hours and sit there and listen. And then I would also have to do school. And then I would come out of that room and all of my family members would be like, how was it? How was it? And that was the worst thing in the entire world for me. Finally, I told them, I said, nobody is ever allowed to ask me how my therapy went today, because I would do it for 3 hours, but then the entire day would still be talking about it, what I learned. And I love my family. And they were so trying to be supportive, which I think is so important. But it just did not work for me. They did it in the wrong way. I said, just please do not ask me how my therapy went. I need something to distract myself. And I finally remember this time when it was like a breaking point for me. I was doing exposure therapy, and one thing I tried to do is I was like, okay, I'm gonna fix this as soon as I can because I hate it here. I hate doing therapy like through Zoom, and I would be talking with my counselors, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get this done as fast as I can. But in order to do this, they said like you can kind of take it slow. But I was like, okay, no, I'm just going to hit it as hard as I can. So I wouldn't tell them when it got super, super bad. And I would just be like, no, keep going with the exposure therapy. And so there was this one day, I remember we were going through a lot of my compulsions, and I was just pushing myself so hard. Finally, I just broke down sobbing. I was like, please stop. You are hurting my soul. My soul is breaking right now. Please stop. Please, I can't handle this. And so that was one of the really low points. And he was kind of shocked. My therapist that I'd been working with was like, oh, I didn't know it was this bad. We can, of course, go slower. But I was like, no, I'm done with this. And so actually that was the day I quit this intensive care. And it was probably not the smartest decision, but it was like, I can't survive like this. I need to express, I think therapy is very, very helpful. I did it in the complete wrong way. I pushed myself way too hard. So yeah, it got very, very bad. And of course, then when you've got one mental disorder, more set in. So when I got super, super bad depression, I wouldn't go out of the house. I wouldn't do anything. And I would just sit there in these thoughts. And like I said, my family is so supportive and so loving. But they would always try and do these things to fix me. Or my mom would always research and she'd say, Rachel, you're not getting enough sunlight. You have to sit out in the sun now. I'd be like, okay. So she'd make me sit out in the sun. And like that didn't help. Or she would be like, you are now going to eat so much oranges. You need that vitamin C. Or all these like crazy cures that she was just trying to find. She even tried like essential oils, everything just to try to fix me. But I was like, oh, Mom, no, I just don't want to do this. I just don't want to do this. And one thing that actually helped me is we had a friend, like an old neighbor that owned some horses. And I love animals so much. So this is when I had a much depression and so much OCD. And I just honestly stopped doing online school. I did end up passing that year, but barely. My mom, she just wanted something to get me out of the house. So she called up her friend and said, hey, can Rachel just like scoop poop for your horses? She will literally shove your horses if just then she just gets to pet them. She doesn't even have to ride them or anything. So she said yes. And so I would go to this horse stable every day. And honestly, I would just sit there in the sun and I would like shovel out the stables and be scooping horse poop and smelling awful. But that was honestly very helpful to me. Because I was getting exercise and I was in the sun and being around animals. I had a lot of time to think, which sounds bad. And it was bad for quite a while. But it took that time to go through and think. And I was like, okay, I'm in a slightly better place. And one of the main things with OCD and depression and ADD is, for me, they've gone in so many waves. It just completely up and down on the weekly, on the daily, on the monthly. I'll have like super great day. I'm on top of the world. And then at night, I'll be like awful. And it just completely fluctuates like crazy. And it's like, there's not like a super good way to even predict it for me. And then we ended up going back to school. And I kind of got bad again, and I was getting better and worse. And some days my OCD would be very bad, and some days my depression, I would just feel this overaching sadness. There's no like point. And so it would just fluctuate like crazy, but I kind of went numb, and I was like, okay, just get through school, like whatever. Like I would just go through like my day. And I can't even remember like a single school day from that. Like, just because you go into that mode where you're just very focused, you're focused very much inward. They always say like, oh no, you need to focus outward to feel better. But I physically couldn't. I was so focused on a thing I had gone to therapy, and at this point, I'd stopped taking medication altogether because through some of the different ADHD medications, I actually started having anxiety attacks. I started taking this medication that would like increase your heart rate, and so I would just sit there in school and I would take it before school, but then just feel so nervous in school. Like I can't sit here anymore. I can't sit. So then just go home and cry from this medication. So after that, I would just quit all medication together, which probably wasn't the smartest idea. And I definitely don't want to give the impression from this that medication doesn't work. I'm on medication now. I think it's such an important thing, but it's a process. People really need to realize that. I almost wish I'd been told that at the beginning of this, because I kind of just thought like, they're like, oh, we're going to have to try a few things. But I was like, well, maybe the first one will work. But like is very much a process. So with that, a lot of depression and OCD, and especially just hiding this from everyone, right? I started to have a lot of suicidal thoughts. And of course, first those were intrusive thoughts and be like, no, I would never do that. Ah. And then they started to get real, and I would want to do self-harm. And so finally there was one night when I did end up doing self-harm. And then after I just felt awful. And so I actually made a promise to myself. I was like, I'm never going to do that again. I think the reason why I was able to choose not to do that specific thing was because I caught it so early, because I was like, I've only done this once. I'm never going to do this again. But I definitely don't want to imply that you can choose to get better or you can choose to stop your compulsions. Because my mom would say like, oh, just don't do that. Just don't don't like think that. Don't like repeat that mantra in your head. And I couldn't stop any of my compulsions at all. I think it was just because I caught it very early. And I actually think that was a very helpful thing to me, to just make this promise, be like, okay, I've still got a lot of compulsions. I've got a lot of things. And, I still very much hate myself, but I'm never going to do self-harm again. And so, there's been a lot of times when I've like imagined it and just thought, but I actually, I researched ways for different things you can do instead when you have that compulsion. So there was one day when I put Band-Aids all over my legs. I found a pack of like 100 Band-Aids, and I just started putting them on my legs and just like all over my body, because I don't know, that was supposed to trick my mind and feel like you're going to heal yourself instead of hurt yourself. And honestly, it was therapeutic in just that I was doing the same motion over and over again. And I was able to kind of calm my mind down until I was like, okay, I'm in a better place now. So if that makes any sense, I definitely am not suggesting if people already do self-harm, they can just choose to stop, or even I couldn't stop any of my compulsions. But if you haven't started it, I would almost encourage anybody who's listening to this to just like make a decision and be like, no, I'm not ever going to do this thing. Because when you're in that state, there's like very few things that you cling on to, and you're like, well, I can just do this once. But it's definitely important to do that. I think that was one of the things that helped me start on my recovery, being able to be like, okay, I have to make a choice, because throughout it, my mom took me to a lot of other therapists. And so I used to be nice, but by like, a few down the road, I started being very mean. And I remember there was this one gentleman, and I was very, very rude to him. He would tell me things, and I would straight up just say, no, that won't work. I've tried that. No, it won't work. And I don't know. I try to be very polite. I'm kind of intimidated by adults, but it was a very new thing. And my mom took me home that day. She's like, Rachel, what are you doing? Like, you can't say that to people. And I was just like, I'm tired of people telling me what to do. Like, I can't do this anymore. But what started kind of my upward climb was almost realizing my mom's going to tell me all these things, and people are going to tell me all these things, and I'm going to try these things, but I have to make the decision to try to find these things myself. If that makes any sense. I definitely don't believe that you can choose to be better. You can't choose to get better. And that's a lot of things people say, like, oh, just choose to be happy, choose optimism. I'm like, no, you cannot choose to be better. But it had to be my choice to say, I want to recover from this. It had to be my choice to say, I don't want to be in this dark place anymore. I'm going to make the choice to do my own research, because my mom could tell me to do all these things, but until I decided, hey, I'm going to try this for myself, actually. And until I was doing my own research, until I found, okay, I think this will work. I'm going to try this. That was where I started upward climbing, because it very much had to be a choice. I want to get better. I can't stay in this anymore. And it definitely wasn't a moment I was like, oh, next day I wake up, man, I'm feeling so great. Hallelujah. But it started this journey, and I'm still on that journey. I think I will be the rest of my life. It's like exercise. You have to keep doing it every single day. And I still have so many dark times and ups and downs, and I still deal with a lot of all these ADHD, depression, and OCD, but I've learned better ways to manage it. I've made the choice that I'm not going to sit there and let it happen to me and let other people try to fix me, because it doesn't work. I've tried it and it doesn't work.
I'm so glad to just hear those pieces of your story and all of the things that you've learned. I think it is really powerful to hear from someone who has been through a lot and who is finding ways to choose to be in a better place. I think that's powerful for me to hear.
Yeah, it was a choice to be better, and also a choice to finally believe kind of what my mom had been telling me, because a lot of mine was religious OCD and like, is God mad at me? Am I a terrible person? And I finally had to come to the conclusion on my own that I I had to say to myself, I'm not a bad person. I do bad things. I have horrible thoughts, like really, really evil things, but I am not a bad person. And people have been telling me that for years. Like my dad, he was actually a bishop in our church, and he would tell me that. He would say, Rachel, I know you're not a bad person. I'd say, I don't believe you. But I had to make that choice, say, okay, I'm not a bad person. I had to choose to believe what they were telling me.
It sounds to me like there's some amount of like buy-in that has to happen both with treatment and just like in your own like mental state. You sort of have to be able to commit and be willing to try to get better, which I think is really interesting to hear about. The whole idea that it doesn't just happen to you, that you kind of have to be an active part of your own recovery, I think is really powerful to hear and learn about. So you talked about making the choice to believe what people were telling you and to start being part of your recovery and treatment and all of that. So then what? I mean, you said that you're getting a lot better, but that it's not gone now. So like what is it like for you now with these conditions that you still have? And like you said, you'll be on the journey for the rest of your life. Where are you at now?
Yeah, so I've had to find my own ways to deal with things. For me, the ADHD, like, I don't know if you could tell, but quick in my journey, that became the least of my problems. But I guess I'll start with that. I've learned to manage it in ways where, like, for doing homework, for instance, I'll like do it, and then I will be like, okay, I have to walk now. I have to go on a walk, or I'll like drink water, and I still have trouble listening in class. I'll be honest, I've fallen asleep in quite a few places, but different things that I found work for me. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to take a walk now, or I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to listen to music to make it fun while I'm doing homework. With depression, I'm still trying to find a good medication for it. And I have very good days and very bad days. But I've started telling my mom about it, and we've come to this agreement where I will tell her about it, and she's not going to fix me. She's not going to say like, oh, well, have you tried this? Or like, oh, well, you didn't sleep last night, so that's why. But I can just tell her that, and she'll just listen. And we're still trying to find ways to that. But honestly, what's helped a lot with that is, it sounds so dumb, but exercise. And everyone had been telling me that for years, and I would hate it. I'd be like, no, I'm not going to exercise, or I do exercise. But again, it had to be my choice to exercise. And I felt when I exercise, maybe it's because I'm a little bit more tired. So I can go to sleep faster. So I don't get into that depressive habit where I'm at 3 a.m. just sitting there like, and like being outside, and definitely not healed at all, but just little things that make it more manageable. And with OCD, there are very many times when I would ruminate, and I would say, oh, is God mad at me? Because that was what my specific OCD was. Or am I a horrible person? And finally I became so tired of it. One day I just said, well, maybe I'm going to hell. Maybe I am. And I'm done. I'm done caring. And obviously I wasn't, but that was kind of one of the steps that helped me. I was like, fine, bring it on. But with it, just little things that make it more manageable, where I'll recognize that I'm doing a compulsion. I'll catch myself, and I'll have to flip it on its head, like almost. It's been a very hard thing to do, but like a focus on the thought that's so bad that I don't want to think about, that I'm trying to push away. But but you it's gonna come no matter what. So you have to think about it. So I'll focus and delve into that, be like, well, maybe I am. And I've gotten a lot better. I found a lot like with myself, I had to come to peace with what my specific OCD was about. So I've found peace with God, and I've got a better relationship with him now. I feel like I can talk to him, and I'm not a bad person. I just do bad things. And so I think and I definitely still get a lot of OCD stuff, but it takes a while, but there is like a peace you can find with it when you finally just let go. And people have been telling me my whole life, right, to do that. And so I feel so dumb saying it.
I think what you said was really important, that we are on a journey for our whole lives, this process of getting better that isn't linear and involves moments where you have revelations and ideas and make leaps, and moments that you go backwards too. And I think that's really important to recognize. I'm curious, you've had so many of these experiences, and I'm sure that you've had interactions with teachers and with peers about mental health. What do you think that we could do differently in our community and as teenagers to better support people that are struggling with mental health?
I think for me, one of the things that I've said earlier is just I would hate it when people would offer me solutions because it's done out of love. And so that's the worst part, where I can't get mad at them because I know they're doing it out of love. So I think don't offer solutions, and just talking about it more, making it realize, because I felt like I had to keep it so internalized. I couldn't speak it out loud because I was worried I would get sent back to this treatment facility, like I said, where I was just living in or I felt like I couldn't talk about it because I would make people sad. Like I said, I would make my mom sad by talking about it. Just starting the conversation, and maybe people aren't ready to share about it. I definitely have had a lot of times when people say, "Oh, tell me about yourself," or even sisters be like, "So what is really going on with you?" And I'll be like, "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to tell you. I'm not like ready." I think people need to realize that every day you make it through is progress. And even if that doesn't make sense, because maybe it's just progress to the next day that you will, I guess, be less in a bad place. And maybe that's just because the wave of your mental health is going up and down, not because of something you're doing. But every day you make it through is progress. And it's not like you will go backwards a lot and be like, "Oh, I'm in such a worse place and I was good for this minute." But every step you are taking, every day you're alive is still progress, and just being patient with yourself. You have to learn a lot of patience. Patience with yourself when you go backwards, or when you do something and realize it later, or in patience in dealing with, like I said, medication, because medication definitely takes a lot of patience in trying so many different things that you think are going to cure it, and it doesn't. And there have been so many different solutions and stuff I've tried, ones that I've researched, ones that therapists have told me that didn't work like at all. But I was still good to do them because it was progress, because those solutions helped me find other solutions that did work. So I think just realizing that it's all progress, and not being like disappointed when you step back, because you will.
Do you have any other advice about getting better for other teenagers who are maybe experiencing things that you relate to?
I always feel weird giving advice because I say, "Oh, I'm not in a great place myself, right? I'm not done. I shouldn't be giving advice when I'm not ready." But I think just little things like making that choice. And of course, I know how hard it is. And you're probably gonna have those days you're like, "No, I'm not. It's too hard to get better." But I think making that choice to kind of do your own research on it. And of course, I'm a huge fan of doctors and therapists, but also doing your own research and reading books and saying, okay, this is going to be my choice to try this. And it's definitely not going to work. So many things are not going to work. You need to realize that. And then also just riding the wave, because it's going to go up and down and fluctuate like crazy. And you're going to have like really, really dark moments. But realizing that it will get better, not just because you're going to be in a great place mentally, but just day by day. I mean, I'm not sure if it was for everybody, but for me, I would be like, "Oh, I can just get through this day because maybe tomorrow my mental health will decide to be good." Because even when I was in those darkest places, I would have a random happy day. I was like, oh, I feel great. And I would also say if you are like a friend or a family member of somebody who is dealing with mental health, give them some space. Of course, be there to love and support them and reach out to them when they need, when they just need to rant, sit there and listen and don't say anything and just nod your head and say, I don't understand this. Because you really have to say that at the end of the day. Even when friends come to me with mental health things, I'll be like, I don't understand this. I don't understand what you're going through because everybody's experience is different. But also giving them some space and not constantly asking, at least for me, I was not constantly asked, well, how did your therapy go? How are you feeling today? Because it's done out of love, but for me, it just puts so much pressure. I think giving them space and realizing they need to figure it out on themselves. It's a very internal thing, but being there when they're ready to reach out, but also accepting when they're not. I've totally like pushed away hugs from people saying, just don't touch me right now. I just need some time, but just being there and realizing that they'll come to you when they're ready.
I am so inspired by what you shared, and I genuinely think that it will be valuable to many people who will listen to this podcast. So thank you for being here and being willing to talk about things that aren't easy to talk about all of the time. We are so grateful for you.
That was like living like Tartarus. Like, can I say that on the show? I don't know. It's like the underworld in Greek mythology.
Sure, yeah.
I'm trying to like.
I don't know. That's exciting. Dang it.